I'm so curious because you started filming this back in 1982. And, so
that sounds right.
It's true.
Ladies and gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
So good.
Excellent.
I'm so curious because you did film and then you were shut down because of COVID. While you were shut down, did things get tweaked in the editing room? What did you learn when you were cutting what you shot that sort of impacted the finished, the episodes?
It actually gave us, COVID was terrible, we all acknowledge that, but that time off gave us time to do a lot of this recalibration Kiki was talking about, gave me time to breathe with the scripts and actually work on the back half of the season, and also gave our visual effects team time to catch up with all the work that was needed to be done. So we were still working the entire time, just remotely on editorial, visual effects, and on scripts. And also just, as you said, like learning different things about just technical small stuff, like how do the armor fit well, or what set looks good in a certain direction. So it just gave us time to take what we learned from the previous 6 months of filming, 5 months of filming, and then do better when we got back. And I think that as challenging as it was to come back during COVID, with all the protocols and the bubbles and the groups and the masks and the, filming under those circumstances wasn't easy at all. But we had more wisdom and have had time, those 6 months, to sort of learn that I think made the show better.
Television production can oftentimes be like this speeding train,
Right.
that gets going, and you can't stop because everybody wants to continue to make sure it gets done, right? And so when COVID happened, it made us stop that train exactly where we were, look at everything we had done and reassess and figure out what the best path forward was. And it, I think, was one of the best things that happened to us production-wise, because it forced us to look at where we were, decide where we wanted to go, and really just gave everybody a chance to catch up. As Steve said, visual effects and all that stuff. Everything is just in a place where you're like just getting a step behind, and to be able to say, okay, wait a second, or have to do that, really saved us on many levels.
And as much as, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it got us out of the weeds creatively too, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're on that train, you have that tunnel vision, and it let us sort of raise our horizon line and kind of look across what we'd done and what we had left to go, and sort of how best to focus on what was or wasn't working particularly, and sort of shift as we came back. So having that, being able to be a little bit more objective about it for a while, I think helped us.
Yeah, I came on board, the train was already going. So I was building track as the train was moving. So it helped me. But I think also coming back during COVID, ironically, considering how we had to be so separate from each other during COVID, no one was in the same band anymore, no one was socializing. Going through that together, I think, brought the crew and the cast together in a different way. And I think the effort that the crew, especially the 1,000 people working on the show, did during COVID, I think also contributed to just making the show what it is, successful, because I think everyone felt that we were a family building this thing together, and it comes through.
Did you guys do any additional photography for the first episodes that you had shot when you got back?
Well, we owed a lot of stuff anyway, so we were always shooting out of order, but certainly we had time to cut episodes and say, you know what, we could actually use an extra connective tissue here, or let's reshoot that scene, very few of those, thankfully, to make it work better now that we know where it's going, that kind of stuff. So any chance you could have to redo anything, we took during COVID. But also we had so much to do when we got back, so it was really more about fine-tuning and preparing for the next, for shooting again and doing things better.
This is based on a super popular video game, and with diehard fans, what were some of the third rail things that you're like, we cannot change this under any circumstances?
It was tough, and I think there's sort of two things. One is optimizing for the medium and optimizing for telling this character story. And there's also wanting to give that Halo audience a different experience from the game. It's not just to say, here you can play your game and here you can watch your game in live action. So the intent really was for it to bring you into the universe and let you experience it in a different way. I think the things that were sacred were the themes of Halo, the things that sort of resound through any Halo experience, which is those themes of hope and heroism and humanity and sort of the wonder and mystery of sci-fi. Those were sacred. And then we would look at, in the same way, the spirit of a character, right? Not just the sort of on paper attributes, but who do they mean to people, and what is the character of the character? And same with moments, like what's sort of the intent of a moment, what's sort of the meta of a moment, not just this snapshot you may have experienced in the games. And so that's how we approached that. And then there's, the sounds and the sights and all of those. What is the foundation of those from silhouette and function and the things that sort of define them, but how do you bring them into live action? How do you bring them into a real world and make them feel grounded and credible? Even with Cortana, how do you bring a hologram into live action and have her act alongside real people, and have that feel like it's believable, and have that be a character that the actors and other characters can connect with? So Cortana is who she is, like that spirit of her. She looks a little bit different in the games, and frankly, she looks different in every game that we release. All on how do we make it feel like everyone is and everything is of the universe. So people should feel like they're stepping into a Halo world, right, and a Halo story. But we definitely have taken liberties and established the silver timeline so the story could grow the way it needed to, without burdening the game and vice versa.
What's great, too, is you would allow us to dig into the Halo verse, and I might say, hey, there's this character that shows up once in a graphic novel or in a comic, in a book or in a game, but we don't have much besides their character title and their rank. Can we give them a life? And we would work together to actually build out that character.
Which was the most fun part, right?
Yeah.
The rubble you never actually see. You read about it, and building that space out was incredibly gratifying creatively.
Of the 9 episodes, is there one specifically that you would recommend fans look a little deeper to find an Easter egg or two?
Episode 10.
Yeah. We have little ones sort of spread throughout. Yeah. Some quite obscure for very, very deep lore fans. Some in 7, for sure.
I wasn't on Easter egg duty, but I'm particularly partial to episode 6. I really enjoy the arc of episode 6 and how it feels as a kind of standalone thing. So I'm looking.
Oh, do share more, please.
I'm looking forward to
It's the
people
6th
experiencing
episode.
that one. That's the spoiler I can give. 6. Watch it.
But I have to say, we have this brilliant, is she an art director, Ava? What do we call her? Graphics person?
Yep.
But everyone's brilliant. But we have certain people who would design things, working with Kiki and 343 on Canon, and just put stuff into scenes. So it could be a billboard on a building in the distance with an advertisement and if you're a Halo fan, you'll recognize the product that they're selling, or just little things like that that just sort of
Halsey's lab is ripe with
with little
detail.
Easter eggs. And then even in a turn of a phrase, sometimes we'll try to find something from the show, from the game, or a reference to something that we don't actually go forward, but it's, if you have your antenna up and you're a Halo person, you'll get it.
Another thing I'm very curious about, who borrowed what from set with every intention of bringing it back when you start filming season 2?
Any thieves in the back row?
Your what? What'd you say?
I said my mullet.
Your mullet.
You gave that back right away.
You
Space
adopted it,
mullet
didn't you?
didn't come home with it.
I think it's like harder on a show like this to like, I think on other jobs I've been like, oh, I've accidentally gone home with my earrings, but on this, like, I'm not gonna accidentally go home in like some Halo sci-fi trousers. I'm gonna remember that I'm wearing those. So I
have something.
Oh.
I'm not going to tell you what it is.
I know the Lady Spartans were very, very eager to try to get home with their helmet. I'm pretty sure neither one managed.
That's right.
And I think there's a lot of people making sure they never do.
Do I even want to know, or do you how? And maybe you don't have an answer, you want to share it, but how expensive is it to make that helmet and to make those the suits?
Well, when you see them littered across the battlefield,
It's a lot.
It gets more and more expensive.
Custom built in the UK.
Yeah.
Very
They were built
fitted.
at FBFX in the UK, who are outstanding. Yeah, they're they're highly expensive plastic, and what we found is they just don't hold up the way virtual armor does. So
It's crazy. how
yeah,
that works,
literally,
yeah.
like it looks like a crash site every time there's a battle scene. We had an amazing team on set who are helping, literally like taping, gluing, sewing.
I think a lot of people don't realize that sometimes the people that cosplay and make their own costumes can be actually better than what's being used on set.
Yeah, because they're the ones wearing it and building it, right? So they're highly aware. I'm sure.
Shout out to cosplay
Yeah,
players.
do it.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
It's good. They're good costumes. I'm not sure they're better than FBFX immersion. They are. These things look pretty darn good.
They look amazing.
They have held up. You know, it's hard to try to put them through the rigors of battle. They're not real armor. You know, it's not Mjolnir. It's just plastic. And I have so much respect for the people who built it because it does look so amazing and it is functional to a certain point, but there's only so much you can do when you're like rolling around and blowing shit up. And you know, my poor Ballant is one of my favorite guys on set.
Our little repair guy.
He was our costume repair guy, and he was definitely the busiest man on set. He was overseeing all of the Spartans every time they were there, running around picking up our spare pieces and like flash gluing them on.
Yeah. But these guys and gals in the armor looked incredible.
The funny noises that you would make too, like just
Oh yeah,
walking
you can
around.
hear them. You can hear them coming.
Squeaking.
I actually was curious how many takes were ruined because someone was laughing from a weird sound of the armor.
Well, I don't know about the laughing part, but I will tell you that I am now in the process of doing ADR for the season 1 of Halo, and I don't believe there's a single line
While you're in
that
armor,
is production, you know, audio. It's all being
I
replaced.
called them the Clydesdales because you could literally hear them from behind coming.
The best was they
on
had
the
these
set.
giant chairs on set. Most people have the little director's chairs. They had these giant,
the camping chairs.
like canopies. They would just sit in them like in their
Like
armor.
the
And then-
seat.
Oh, you need to share this online.
Yeah, they were so
good.
fun to get
Oh, we have lots of
into.
pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry, they're
Yeah.
coming.
Oh, yeah.
They're coming.
For this version of Halo, was it ever almost like a completely different show? Like, how did you decide this is the exact story we want to tell, especially in the first season?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that came before me. When I came on board, the prior writing team, Kyle Kellen, had already kind of chosen a path and carved out an idea. And so I came in and sort of built on that. But you can speak to before I got there. There was...
Yeah, I mean, I would say part of the length of process was trying to figure out the right story to tell. And so we did go through a few different iterations. We went through a few iterations where it was very much a retelling of stories we've told before. We went with iterations that was way out there, and I think we ended up in a place that, you know, really takes a lot of what exists already in Halo, but also builds a lot of great new story on top of it. And so, yeah, there was quite a bit of exploration, and that was just organic, right? Because there's not a formula. We just had to sort of feel our way through it.
I think the path was actually really that's the smart one, which is, you know, you're telling the story of Master Chief, who in the game you are Master Chief, right? So he is sort of a mystery. And there's canon about his backstory, but the idea of who he really is a bit of a mystery. So I think it was really smart of the prior writers, and then I built on, is to sort of take the first season and say, well, who is Master Chief? Let's do it through Master Chief himself discovering his own who he is. And then that built onto a theme of so as he discovers his own humanity, we start asking questions about humanity, and that just laid out sort of a theme for every other character and for the whole season. This idea of whether it's AI and is Cortana, can she ever be human? Whether it's how much of your own humanity you want to sacrifice to save humanity, it all sort of stemmed from Master Chief's personal journey of discovery.
Did you sort of map out, in an ideal world, we are going to do 5 seasons, and we're going to hit each mark on each season? Like, how did you figure out where do we want the story to sort of stop at the end of season 1? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, you know, this one was interesting because I think that's sort of the ideal approach of, you know, what do we want the next 5-10 years to look like? Like, that's how we approach the games as well. But I think also, once we got into the story and really the focus of it being Chief finding his humanity, right, or understanding what his humanity means, understanding who John is, I think as we got into that, we focused really on what that arc could be, because it was so hard to figure out the right balance with canon and news story. And so I think we're now at a point where we're looking ahead to the next 5 years. And so we definitely were a little more organic season 1, but I think we now have sort of that sense of path, and we have so many places we can go, right? That becomes the hardest part, which is if we're focusing on the character, what of all those stories in those places is the right way to tell that story versus we want to make sure to hit just this thing or that thing.
And a lot of it also
canon.
meant having restraint, because I would get enthusiastic. Why don't we show this? Why don't we? And then we would come to conversations and say, you know what? Let's hold that for, there's more to come, you know? So it was about what not to include as opposed to what to include, because you could go crazy trying to get everything in there at once, and it's kind of nice to sort of wait and have patience and let it play out.
And keep the focus on
the main story,
Chief and the characters.
Speaking of Chief and the characters, the first episode, you are introduced to a planet, to these new characters, and all of a sudden the Covenant, and this is all before you even see the title Halo. So I'm just curious, what was it actually like filming that action set piece? Because that is not something that gets filmed in an afternoon. That is a...
Certainly wasn't.
Right, exactly.
This one was a hero through that whole process, honestly.
Yes.
Through the whole show, she's a trooper, man. What was it like shooting that sequence?
Tiring.
So much running.
So much running. I mean, she's just very lucky, but it was just like a whole month of just running away from explosives and just
Literally
trying to not die. But it was a lot of fun, and there's a lot of people who support you and make you feel safe, and the stunt team were great, and I think the sequences were really well planned out, and I think that always helps. It's a lot of fun.
We shot that sequence at the end in the spring because we needed good weather, which apparently Hungarian springs are very unpredictable. So we literally had snow, sleet, rain, freezing temperature, over 100-degree temperature, all in that one sequence.
Yeah, we had we put actually all the action sequences were at the end of the show. I think it mostly happened that way because of COVID restrictions. Like
Weather,
originally, it was going to be sort of that way with the action stuff interspersed at the end with some of the more dramatic stuff, and then because COVID and the weather, we had episode 1, 5, and 9, which contain most of the larger
The
action
VFX
stuff.
team was very happy about
All that
about
stuff
that,
was
yeah.
at the end of the shoot, right?
It's so crazy because everyone I speak to who makes other things, movies and other series, they all say we shoot the big VFX first, so the VFX team has the most time to be working on these shots.
Yep.
Yeah, we were behind schedule
Yep.
from day one,
Yep.
and VFX-wise, because it was...
Well, leaving in March, right? We were supposed to start shooting in the spring, and when COVID hit and we all left in March of 2020, that really disrupted the schedule.
Yeah.
So that actual sequence, which is, I'm going to say 6 or 7 minutes of screen time, how long did that actually take you to film?
That was Otto Bathurst was the director of the first 2 episodes, so he had already been there to shoot most of the first 2 episodes earlier on, and then he came back for, I believe, 8 or 9 days, 10 days of shooting. So it was around 2 weeks or
I think
3
it was
weeks.
3 weeks,
Right?
including
Yeah,
the
it
second
was
unit.
3 weeks. He heavily storyboarded, like all credit to Otto for. There was no way we could have gotten through that much with all of the weather changes and all that without sort of meticulous planning and storyboarding.
And the location was amazing. Sophie Becher, Sophie Beecher, who was our art director for the first season, did amazing work. Created this just wonderful set inside. What was it? An old
It's like an aluminum factory.
or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was this contained circle that had our whole set, and everything else outside on the show is visual effects. But inside that circle of the aluminum factory with this weird sky pipe that ended up being our sky pipe was all contained set and really, really amazing, beautiful.
And that set sat outside for a year, right, because of the delay, which actually weathered it in this perfect way.
Cool.
Also, you have to plan every shot because a lot of the shots had aliens in them. So you can't just say, well, we'll just point the camera this direction. It was, okay, now you have to figure out the visual effects of that as well and incorporate that into your planning. So it was meticulously done in spite of the crazy weather you guys went through and the heavy armor you had to wear and running around and jumping. And it was...
Yeah. And it showed up on Google Maps. I tried to get it taken down.
The location did, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they were like...
Yerin, you spend a lot of that episode with blood on your face. And I'm just curious, what is that like? Because that can't be pleasant to have that stuff all over you all the time.
No, it's a lot of time in the makeup chair in the morning, and continuity is, very particular. But to be honest with you, I kind of just forget about it. And then when people look at me in the morning, they're like, oh, Yerin. And I'm like, oh, I forget that I have blood all over my face.
Did you ever want to leave set and just like go to a local supermarket and just walk through with that blood? Because I think it would just be a blast to see people's reactions. Just
I think it'll be fun, yeah. I'm sad I didn't do that, but we were in the middle of nowhere, so yeah, I would have if we were in the city, but
Next
no,
season.
Yeah, next season.
More blood.
More blood.
Yeah.
More
supermarkets.
Yeah, more supermarkets.
the first 2 episodes, obviously when you're filming, you are imagining so many different things. What was it actually like seeing everything for the first time?
Well, I'll start because I can fill in some of that because I've been watching it as it's gone along. And one of the most amazing things of this whole process has been seeing the visual effects get filled in, because you start with this, like you said, acting in front of a green screen or acting in that circle, a set that was created with nothing behind it. And then every single cut that comes in gets progressively more detailed, and the VFX team's doing an amazing job on it. And so watching it come together in that way is one of the great joys of watching the process.
I was obviously not experiencing all the adversity that Yerin and other characters were, but it was just in my lab. But we were acting, or I was acting with just a green screen, as you say, nothing, sort of trying to imagine what might be put on the monitors. So then to actually see the first 2 episodes and see all the fill-in and the kind of realization of Halsey's creations up there and the process that she goes through in order to create Cortana was incredibly cool. Yeah, very gratifying.
The first 2 episodes really opened the door to this universe and all these characters and all the places you could go. For fans that are so excited, what can you tease about like the rest of the season?
I'm just excited for people to see the show unfold because, as you've commented, it begins with a bang. It really sets the stage for what you can expect from the rest of the season. But it delivers, in my opinion, on different levels. It's not just for action fans or sci-fi fans or even Halo fans, although they will hopefully all be well rewarded for their time. It's just a really fun, amazing story of a journey of a character and the other characters discovering themselves in this existential war for their own survival against the aliens. It's a sort of an epic opera. It's set in 26th century, but really grounded in just everyday emotions. And so I think it's going to be a feast for the eyes, but also hopefully really just a compelling story. And every episode lays out a little bit more. And so you get more and more invested with Master Chief's journey and more invested in this universe. And I think hopefully by the end, you could come to it having never played the game once, and you're now on footing with everyone else in the Haloverse who loves this canon, because we're just bringing you in a different direction.
I think also, like all good sci-fi, it asks the sort of deep existential questions about why we're here, how we got here, what we value, what we don't value, what's fashion, and as of now, even if it's a kind of moral fashion, and you look at a different moral construct, and if you're looking from that point of view, was what happened to Master Chief morally reprehensible, or in fact, if you're saving the future of mankind, does anything go? Long-term gain for short-term pain, sort of all of those questions we spoke about in depth, as well as AI and singularity. I think from Halsey's point of view, there's a sort of strange schism that happens, which she feels entirely in control of her creation and is quite confident that this is going to work. And then there's a certain point at which Cortana develops empathy, let's say, or maybe we haven't explored that fully. But that sort of idea of, I suppose, the scientist, she has a huge ego, but her curiosity is even greater than her ego. So watching Master Chief's behavior and watching him change and perhaps be less respectful, less responsive, start to ask more questions, she's more excited by that in a way than even being disobeyed or disrespected or sort of losing control. I've found that really fun to play with.
Halsey, your character seems like she will go to any length to accomplish her mission. Do you think there's a line that she will not cross to make whatever she thinks is necessary happen?
Be careful. She's really good at justifying really reprehensible
But actually, to that point, what I found really exciting about this project and why I wanted to do it many reasons I wanted to do it, but one of the big reasons I wanted to do it was to ask those questions that I feel we should be asking every day anyway, which is what is, I suppose, a response to groupthink, and what is actually progress, and can you do things that feel morally reprehensible to the current status quo, but actually, I mean, let's look, I don't know, Galileo or someone, you know, he said something that at the time he was put in jail for, and yet we now all know to be true. So I was working on that sort of premise that what happens if you're protecting future generations, and if actually you care more about the future than you do about the present, does that make you a terrible person? I think all of those things are fascinating, and I can go on forever about it.
I told you.
The villain never sees himself as a villain. No, the big thing for us, the word I kept using, whether it was with actors, with the writing, with the composers, is this idea of yearning. Every character is yearning for something just out of their reach. And for Halsey, it's this idea that there's an intelligence in the universe that she wants to get to know. And that leads to a lot of her Machiavellian sort of approach, but it's also based on a real sincere human hope to aspire to greater things, to reach for that. And so every character in their own way is on that journey, including the aliens who are trying to reach for something beyond their grasp, and they have an idea of what they think it is, the Covenant. And so it sort of puts a sort of a veneer of nobility to everybody's quests. And sometimes their methods might be not so noble, but we can at least relate to their yearning.
Jen, when you booked Halo, way back when, you had no idea what this game was going to become and no idea just how popular this thing would be. When you were asked to be a part of the series, at first, were you like, is someone punking me right now? Like, what?
I got an email from my darling friend Kiki here, and yes, I think I read the email several times, and I think my husband was in the middle of work, and I knocked on his office door and said, "I need you to end your meeting. I need you to end your meeting." It's like, what's going on? It's like, come here. That was my response. Yes. I did feel, yeah, punked is a great way to describe it.
What can you tease about Cortana's role over the course of the season?
This character gets to have some moments in this show, some experiences in the show that I have never experienced in the 20 years of playing this role. How's that?
I think that's
a good tease.
I get to do some fun, interesting things that I've never done before.
I think one of the interesting things about the Chief Cortana dynamic that is different from the games, or that is exciting for people who love the games, is that you get to see their relationship at a different point than you ever do in the games. It's early on in the Chief Cortana relationship, and that dynamic, you get to see kind of how their relationship began, which is an interesting place to take it from.
And you get to see much more of Dr. Halsey and Cortana in their relationship, which is something that we don't do a lot of in the games. You sort of see the creation of her, but you also see there's always been such an interesting sort of triangulation with Chief and Halsey and Cortana that we see in the games, and this really explores the relationships individually, which I think adds an added dimension to the dynamic, and I think the story also sort of pushes on the boundaries of those relationships in a super interesting and different way.
And there's a great bond that forms between Chief and Cortana in the sense that they're both Halsey's children in some way. And of course, there's also Miranda, who is Halsey's child. So there's that sort of weird dynamic that all these characters have to do.
We're sisters.
Yeah, I mean, and we explore that to a certain degree coming up, in later episodes, the idea of the relationship between Miranda and the other Spartans, because they are in some ways siblings.
Family.
So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, that dynamic, definitely, because I think that Halsey, albeit potentially unethically, but more attentively, definitely has raised the Spartans and even Cortana in a way than Miranda. So that was something super interesting to play with.
She's just upscaling her motherhood.
Upscaling her motherhood.
Outsourcing.
Abandoning her only daughter.
There's other people to look after.
It's all blockchain these days.
I think this might be my last question for you guys. For each of you, which scene or sequence are you most excited for people to see, and in what episode?
Well, for me, it's sort of twofold. I think the scenes in 5 and 9 that are powerful, game-changing scenes are going to be unforgettable for the audience, just in terms of the kinetic, visceral experience of it all. I think that there are, as Pablo was saying, there's small emotional scenes, like in 6 and in 7 and in 8 especially, and then in 9, the finale. It's those little moments, I think, that actually I live for, So you're going to get, I'm excited for people just to get the experience of sitting back and being overtaken by the power of the images of certain scenes coming up, but I think it's the smaller, intimate ones that are going to get you coming back. So I'm excited for people to see that.
For me, I think episode 1, obviously, which you've already seen. I'm very eager, obviously, for audiences worldwide to experience the helmet removal, so we can get that out of the way and begin the process of the discovery of the Chief's humanity and John's humanity, and which is really the course of our season. But I'm also very excited for fans to get to experience episode 5. I think it's going to be a real pleaser for the fandom. So those are my highlights.
I think one of my favorite moments is in episode 3, as we've already spoiled when Cortana appears, sort of the birth of Cortana, because it's such an amazing moment to watch Dr. Halsey see Cortana come to life. I think it's sort of a unique moment for Halsey in the show, and a place where, to me, it feels like you see her so genuinely. So that was a favorite of mine.
For me, a lot of the stuff I really love is the humor that is unexpected. There's quite a lot between Yerin and Pablo. I shouldn't say Yerin and Pablo. I should say your characters' names. But anyway, there's some stuff amidst the mayhem, that just some questions that she asks in in a very guileless way, which I really loved. I thought that was very cool. And there's a moment of another character. I can't say because it's later on, but there's just a few delicious moments where humor just cuts through the drama, which I think, again, good sci-fi, you get that. Bad sci-fi, there's no humor. And it's all very earnest and, leaves me cold. Whereas this, I feel, it gets elevated all the time. And the Spartans, too, the interplay between them, I really love,
I spend a lot of time experiencing the world through what Pablo is experiencing, through what the Chief is experiencing. And there is one scene in particular that I'm really curious how it came out. And I'm excited. And it was an interesting experience for me to film. So I'm really eager to see that.
You don't want to hint if it's in the back half of the season?
What episode is it in? You guys know.
I believe you're talking about 8.
8.
Oh, 8, yes.
Oh, I know exactly.
8.
Yeah. That's true. That's very good. Yes.
For you guys?
I think episode 4 for me. I'm super excited to see some developments and discoveries that Miranda goes through.
Ep 7 for me. I think there's a real Easter egg there, and also a big pivot for Kwan's character storyline.
On that note, I need to wrap and just say thank you so much for talking, and thank you for making a kick-ass show.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.